Folks, we are live. Welcome everybody to our latest GHAIN live event here. And I am graced with the presence of none other than Andrew Choubeta. How's it going, Andrew?
I'm good, my friend. How you doing, brother?
Very good, very good. Actually, we're on this StreamYard platform here, and we can kind of sit in the lobby before we go live, and we were just commenting on how Andrew and I look like we're just about to board space shuttles or play World of Warcraft.
Yeah, it makes my head look a lot larger than it actually is. At least, it looks a little bit different. I got to say that, but it's all right.
I usually have like super sexy white little headphones or whatever, the free ones that you get. But
the AirPods, yeah. Or like the thin iPod ones, yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea where they went. But anyway, so here we are, and hope that the you can hear me crystal clear. So want to get right into an introduction, and then we're going to get chatting away. So Andrew is a paralegal. He's currently operating in Hamilton, Ontario, and he specializes in landlord and tenant law. And Andrew has dealt with a wide range of professional tenants, some of which require police involvement. I'll be honest with you, man. Like, we're friends on Facebook, and you and I chat all the time. Andrew's our paralegal, so whenever us or any of our clients have any sort of paralegal needs, Andrew's our go-to guy. But you probably have some of the funniest stories.
Yeah.
That I've heard of.
True. Yeah, I enjoy collecting those. It's quite interesting. I just sort of became known for that type of thing, where I would get calls for the more difficult matters, and the more outlandish and unorthodox and significantly different cases.
So I'm hoping we can get into a few of these stories because I've heard a bunch of them personally, and they're hilarious. So
yeah.
First and foremost, let's talk about COVID living. How you been keeping?
Well, it's kind of it's very different for many of us. So a lot of paralegals and lawyers are just mostly working from home. A lot of it is being. A lot of the hearings are now telephone hearings. A lot more. If you're actually getting a hearing at all, sometimes you're not getting that. You're not even able to get that far. A lot of people are just serving documents, and that's just it. You're not going to get anything else or move anywhere else. A lot of people, unless it's a very, very serious matter that needs to be handled, and with an emergency motion or anything like that, everything is pretty much gone right now. You're just sort of waiting at home, sort of trying to get things started. There's a lot of files. It's sort of misleading. So there's a lot of people not working, but at the same time, there's a lot of work happening. So things are being pre-filed, pleadings are getting drafted, but everything's just sort of staying in the firms. They're not actually going out. A lot of people are not serving the documents because they don't know when their court dates are going to show up. So, there's a lot of just waiting right now. Just a lot of waiting.
Yeah, it's wild. Now, for those of the viewers who maybe need a little bit of a definition, what's the basic difference between a paralegal and a lawyer, like full blown?
Okay, so there's some hard facts, but I'll give you just sort of the gist of it. So not too long ago, there was a real push for access to justice. There was a lot of people representing themselves, and they were unrepresented when they would go to court. Either that be small claims, family law. We're not, paralegals aren't able to go into family law anymore, but family law, immigration, landlord and tenant, a lot of these things, and they were unrepresented. So paralegals essentially inside Ontario got licensed, and they were able to start representing people. This is back in, Lord, you remember that company, Points, 222 Points? Like this was back in the day. This is when I was actually a kid. I was probably about 10 or 11. It was a company that would do traffic tickets. So it's one of the first companies that was
doing like ex-copper kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly, right. And it was run by an old police officer that became paralegal, and they started doing representation, and that sort of streamed out into a paralegal. Now, paralegals are they can operate inside the lower courts. Typically, they don't charge as much as a lawyer would, and they're able to handle a lot more. They are able to handle certain types of things. So there's a lot of legal practitioners that don't handle landlord and tenant law or traffic tickets or that type of thing. So a paralegal that has one niche in that specific area, fantastic, right? So you'll have an expert in that particular area. So that's typically what it is.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us a little bit about your background. So when you and I first met, you were working at Keller Williams, and that's kind of how we got associated with one another. But from there, you kind of, you're very diligent. You kind of worked while still going to school, which, was really awesome, if you ask me. tell us a little bit about the transition. What kind of inspired you to get into paralegal?
Yeah, so it's sort of went multiple different ways. So initially, I was working at the YMCA. So I was just doing some training, and I worked the desk there. And then from there, I met
Pilates trainer, right?
Yeah, I wish. No, I was mostly doing track running and that type of thing, coaching and that type of stuff. But I was doing that, and I was inside school at McMaster for history and law. And then from there, I really wanted to go to law school, and that was my dream. And I was doing the LSATs and prepping for that, and I was sending out applications for law school. And at the time, it was a real difficult time because OSAP doesn't cover it doesn't cover law school, not as much as you think it does. And I got
Really?
I had gotten a statement from the University of Toronto for law school for $40,000 for the first year, and it's a 3-year program. So I went, oh, that's a bit much, and for a lot of people, it's a very cost prohibitive way of getting an education. And you can apply overseas and a whole host of other things, but eventually I decided, okay, well, you know what, I need to get into the industry first, and then I'll see where it goes. That's sort of where I met Dan and Susie, and I started working at Keller Williams, and then from there, I worked there for quite a long time. I loved working there. It was 3-4 years, and then at the same time I went to Mohawk College, got my paralegal degree, passed, and got crossed the bar, etc. And then from there, I worked with the Sandy McKay team for a period of time, and then from there I branched off and I created my own firm, and then now I operate primarily in Landlord Tenant Law. I've always had a love since I met Dan and Susan for real estate and then just property and that type of thing. So I sort of navigated towards it, and then eventually, I'm currently going through the process with law school and all that. So I'll eventually finish and then start working in real estate law eventually.
Very cool. Very cool. So, tell us a little bit about this, like what's going on right now with the Landlord Tenant Board, because like I know like we're going through it right now. Like you got one of our guys.
Yeah.
Actually, do you want to maybe tell a little bit about that situation and kind of where you're at?
Oh, okay. You want to talk about that one? Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead, right?
Okay, absolutely. As long as you're fine with it, you can send to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, totally. So you got to be recorded, so.
Yeah, this is Waterman, right? We're talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let me pull up the file. Actually, I'm literally going to pull it up.
Yeah.
This is a hilarious
So just to give everybody a little bit of a background, Kale and I bought a property, just a single family property out in Niagara Falls. First time we've ever bought one out that way. First property we ever bought together, so it was a very exciting kind of moment. And we had a really great first tenant in there, and then we had a really great second tenant in there. And for some reason, I don't know where it broke down, but we got this third tenant in there, and I think it was just at a time in our lives where there was a lot going on, right around where we were getting married, that kind of thing. So I think we skipped a few steps, and you'll know it's probably not the best way to do stuff. So we're like, okay, you just get in there, that's perfect. And we really hadn't felt the burn of bad tenants at any time yet. So the guy was actually good for, I'd say, the better part of a year. And then around September, he's like, you know what? I'm done paying rent.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck's going on here? So anyway, I'll leave the rest up to you.
Yeah, I got okay. So you contacted me. This gentleman was living at your property, bolted, and then didn't pay rent for a significant period of time. And then you had gotten, and we're looking at doing something called a garnishment. Now, when you receive an order from the Landlord and Tenant Board or small claims where you get a judgment, you can take that and you can go to enforcement and you can go ahead and garnish wages from.
To pause the story just very quickly, just to give you guys a heads up. So September, he stopped paying rent. The Landlord Tenant Board was booking out. We had served all the applicable, letters, whatever. Our hearing date came back on February 20th.
Yeah, so we're already significant period of time.
So we've lasted this whole time, no rent. February 20th rolls around, and here we are finally. And like, praise whoever is looking down on us from above. But just before COVID hit, he got the boot. And
so you got the eviction order. Yeah, so you got the eviction order, and that was handed to you, and you can take that, and then you can go forward to enforcement, and that's garnishment, and just simply said a couple of documents from the Superior Court of Justice over to the person's whereabouts and to their place of business, and the business from there sends you essentially like a check, and it goes. It's about 30% depending on how much you're taking, and depending on some rules and that kind of thing. So it's a lot of stuff. So this gentleman, this was very interesting because it immediately took a right turn. It wasn't as if it was straight on the edge. It was immediately a right turn. So I made some calls, and I had an investigator take a look at the situation and try to locate him because I wasn't ultimately able to. I started looking at, MTO searches, driver's license, insurance, unions, places of business, clubs, Boy Scouts, like anything you can possibly think of. I was searching. I wasn't able to locate this guy. Called a friend who works at Ace Investigations, and they ended up finding him. He works. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you viewers don't know what this is, but he works at something called a body rub parlor, which is actually legal inside Ontario and in Canada. It's essentially a place you would go for some sexual services, not all of them, but some of them. And he was is a bouncer or something or the other. That is his job, and he was also being paid in cash. He had no real record of employment. It was a whole host of other things. Ultimately, as of right now, they're still closed because of COVID, right? For obvious reasons, they're very much closed. So he's essentially called garnish proof. So that you can't actually do anything to him until he actually starts employment again. So that's sort of where we're sort of waiting with this particular gentleman, and also a multitude of arrests. Multitude. I think it's like 13 to 14 at this point, from what I understand. And I think most of them are related to sexual activity or sexual work. So, there's some things that are legal and some things that are not. And I guess he was caught with solicitation or something or the other. So I know there's a lot of advocates that sort of want to change those laws and that type of thing. To each his own, do whatever you wish. But
it just goes to show you, though. I mean, like, we've bought numbers of properties, like we've dealt with a lot of tenants, and it just goes to show you the amount of diligence now. And this was a hard lesson. Like, once again, we never really had to deal with like shit like that before. It was wild. And for someone to become very confrontational, who and it's almost like, I can appreciate for a tenant, it's an invasion of their privacy, and for us, it feels the same way, because it's like, we bought this house, we're putting a roof over your head, and we expect, very little, pay your rent and be respectful, and it's crazy. But, it was a real big wake up call for Kale and I, especially during the climate that we're in right now. And like, I don't know about you, but like, what's your whole opinion on what's going on with this LTB, and do you see a light at the end of the tunnel?
That's $1 million question. I'll be honest with you, because I won't shy away from the truthful answer. I would say I was afraid about a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I've gone to almost petrified now. So that's
terrible. I thought you were going to be like, I'm feeling a little better now.
No.
So why? Tell us a little bit, like, what's
so PEI and British Columbia, they started opening up their courts, and they had a backlog of several thousand, right? So for those hearings, and here's the thing: you can't go around and changing court dates. There's an access to justice issue with that. You can't be kicking people out of the line, removing people, placing people in. That's not good, because people have filed at a certain time, and you can't be playing within reasonableness. You can't be picking and choosing who goes first and goes second, right? Everyone's set a queue kind of thing, unless there's like an emergency or that difference, large significant differences. And what's essentially happened here is you have a backlog in PEI, in British Columbia, and all these other places out east of several months off to a year. We were already like that here in Ontario before COVID. Now we've had no hearings for a long time. We have less than the proposed amount of adjudicators and board members that we should have. We have significant less. It takes about 9 months just to train a new adjudicator. I really don't think they're going to be start throwing, the conservative government's going to be throwing money at the problem and then just hiring new adjudicators significantly and quickly. I don't think that's going to happen at all. And then additionally, you have a backlog now of several thousands. And the terrifying thing is we don't actually know how bad the problem is. That's the truthful thing. And there's been reports before, and I can reference to some things. There's been orders missing. There's been files lost. There's been a whole host of things and problems that's occurred. And then additionally, let's just say I'll give you my honest opinion right now. If you file an N4, let's say your tenant doesn't pay your rent this month, right? Uh-huh. You filed it this month. Maybe you get a hearing next November. Maybe. I would say January of 2022.
Really?
Yeah, because I have I have two early hearings that were supposed to happen. They are matters that were dealt back in 2018, and they were initially filed in 2017. So before everyone hears the horror stories of legal matters that take 1, 2, 3 years. That's slowly happening with tenancy law. That's not good because you're having rent issues over several months, if not years. And this is not good for tenants. It's not good for them. It's not good for anybody. And that's the severe problem. Now we're going to have to wait and see because landlord and tenant law is very closely held together with CERB. So when CERB stops and you're going to have this significant influx of people trying to find work, and then additionally not any income, and then already a backlog of a lot of evictions just sort of waiting, I'm really concerned as to what the government will do. And truthfully, I don't have an answer. I'm not saying this as if I have a pipe dream of an idea of what would work. I'm just pointing out the significant issue. You're going to have, if they lift the moratorium on evictions, you're going to have many people being evicted very quickly. Mm-hmm. And if they don't, you're going to have a lot of people going into foreclosure. I have, out of the several files I have 12 right now that are going to foreclosure. Actually, one of the individuals that I'm talking about that had forced into foreclosure because the individual wasn't paying rent from December of last year.
That was who we helped.
Yes,
actually have to sell.
Yeah,
without naming names, like my heart goes out to these folks. Like such a sweet couple trying to do something nice for their kids and build a legacy, and here they, get some shyster tenants in. Yeah. They renovated the whole place beautifully. These tenants came in, destroyed the place.
Yeah,
the place reeks to high heaven, and decided to stop paying their rent.
And I want to point this out because I don't want anyone considering like me or Alex to be disparaging a person that's going through a poverty situation. That's not the case in this.
No,
this was at one point we had to call the police, and there was 54 people living in the property, and the property is what, 200 square feet? No, 2,000 square feet, something like that.
If that,
and there was heavy rampant drug use. There was several reports of guns in the property. Several people got arrested. There was 11 stolen cars in the front driveway alone, a stolen boat in the front lawn. All that had to be removed. Then there was another car again that was stolen, that was in the property by the tenants. Two of the tenants were arrested twice on several charges, released because of COVID, rearrested again. And then we realized that they have had an income this entire time, right? Either that's been through whatever way that they've come up with an income, and then they have two legitimate jobs. They just haven't paid rent, and they've also sold and stolen several thousands of dollars worth of merchandise, cars, drugs, weaponry, a whole host of different things. So this is, this was a very, very bad situation. And then also you do have those other legitimate issues on the other side of things where people just aren't able to pay their rent because they haven't been able to make ends meet. And that's a significant problem too, because landlords aren't out there to kick people out when they're just, they're on hard times. Everyone's gone through hard times. And I'm so concerned about it.
For me, the way, what got me into real estate investing and what got me in this whole trajectory of wanting to build wealth is effectively, is to create a legacy, so I can leave something to my grandkids,
Mhm.
and I enjoy it. I love it. I'm passionate about it. You know, it's fascinating to me and it's exciting, and it's so challenging to me to um, I almost take it personally, you know,
Yeah.
when these
Yeah.
things happen, because it's like, I'll tell you a story. So we were working with Ian Davies. He had a buy on Wellington, and this property was a 2-unit property. And so we had a client, and luckily our client was an investor, so it's not like they're moving right in or anything like that. But Ian's client was this very, very sweet young girl, maybe in her mid 20s. Now, here's a girl who thought she was doing something good. She wanted to save up some money. She was going to put it into a property in Hamilton because people were telling her Hamilton's a great place to invest, and good on her. I mean, like,
Yeah.
in every respect, everybody and their grandmother would probably like shake her hand, say, "You're doing great. You know, this is a very smart investment. This is how you know." And so she got folks in there. And this is the first time in my entire career in real estate that I've walked in on somebody taking a hit out of a crack pipe, like right in front of me, nonchalant, didn't care that I was there. And I'm like, you're like mid toke right now. Like, you can't even put it down for a second. Really. So, anyway, this property, this poor girl, just, these guys devastated the property. And so she was at her wits' end. She didn't know what to do. So she decided to evict the upstairs tenants who were, heavy drug users, and they didn't want to leave or whatever. So she said, "Listen, if you guys just go, I'll pay you some money, and then you just call it a day. That's it." And so they're like, "You just have to sign the N12 or the N11, I believe, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mutual release."
Mhm.
And so they're like, "Yeah, no problem." And she gave them the money up front. So anyway, they're supposed to be leaving.
Oh.
So they get this property. Uh, they need to get it off their plate quickly. At this point, she can't afford to carry it any longer because she's the one fronting all the bills. And lo and behold, guess who doesn't decide to move out because they've got their money and they've blown it all on drugs. So
Yeah.
so they now are holding this place hostage. So this poor girl is like freaking out, and rightfully so, because once again she's there. She thankfully, I guess, knew somebody through the LTB who kind of sympathized, saw what she was doing, found a way to get it up the chain. I don't know, or maybe they just expedited it because it was pending on a sale. It could have been that too. Finally, they got the eviction. We were there for when the sheriff came to change the locks and all that stuff. So the place was, they left all their stuff there.
Yeah.
No sign of them, but all their stuff's there. They change the locks, all is good. Property goes through and it closes. Well, doesn't my client go? I guess it closed on like a
Oh, I heard about
Friday.
this. Oh, this is.
They,
I heard
they
about this. Yeah.
close on a Friday, and he goes there Saturday morning to mow the lawn. And he goes into the backyard, and there's a full tent that these guys had stolen from Canadian Tire, and they pitched a tent in the backyard. And he's sitting there like shaking the tent, and he's like, "You guys have to go." And so, they packed up their tent and they left. But once again, like I come back to these situations where it's like, here's a young girl, man. Like she tried to do nothing but do something wise. Where
that's the nail on the head, right? Like, so let's and we all sort of know why we get into real estate investing, why people get into real estate investing. It's you have a pension. Let's say you've been working 40 years at DeFasco.
Yeah.
Your pension's gonna give you what? Not much, right? So you purchase the property, and then you think, okay, well, I got this one other house that'll be my retirement. That house is worth $500,000. It's income profit, tiny amount of profit for me per month, maybe a couple $100 or whatever.
If that,
if that, right? And then it's a common misconception. People are making thousands of dollars per month. They're not. They're making hundreds of dollars, if that. Some people they're actually taking a loss, but they want to keep that equity inside the property, right? So you hold on to this property for 15 years, 20 years. Then you have a tenant go through and then completely damage the unit or completely damage the property, and you lose $50,000. If someone had gone into your pension and just taken $50,000, you'd be upset, right? That'd be damage.
There'd also be repercussions.
Yes, there'd be a lot of repercussions.
There'd be a lot. Nowadays, it's like a tenant gets away with murder, and that's why, like, when you and I were talking about Waterman, that situation with him, it's like he's out of there now. He's gone. And actually, we have
Yeah.
new tenants in, and they're such lovely people. Thank Christ. But I feel as a moral duty, as an obligation to any future landlord, or and I, we were talking the other day with a friend of mine who like almost hate the word landlord. It's not like we're lords of land.
Yeah.
We're rental housing providers, is effectively what we are, and it's just wild, just wild.
Yeah, it's particularly difficult. I had a client who had now this is where people start to butt heads on the issue, right? Because there's a client that I had not too long ago called me out of Toronto. He owned a very, very profitable and expensive high-rise condominium right on Lakeshore. Beautiful property, and the rent was $5,800 a month. Right, wow. I'm just looking at the file. I have it right over here. Beautiful. The view is amazing. Et cetera, et cetera. The woman that started to rent the property and said the month of January was a high-end social media influencer, a dancer. Was a part-time strip club owner, a host of stuff, and she also made some boutique products, and she would do makeup and that type of thing. But she had a very high-level income, and paid the rent was fantastic. Fantastic tenant, no issues, no problem. It was great. Then skip 3 months in. Right now we're in a couple months in, and he's getting frantic calls from the condominium company. The condominium company's calling in saying, "Hey, your tenant is causing severe damage to the property. He's a terrible tenant," within the words as sent over from a lawyer type of thing, just through legal jargon. And essentially speaking, you have to get her out, or the condo board is going to vote on you to remove you and force a sale. He is concerned. He's wondering what is going on this property. He's out in BC. He calls me and says, "Andrew, I need you to help. Can you figure out what's going on?" I call the tenant. And essentially what the tenant tells me is the condo company's upset about her cat. Cat's kind of large. And I'm like,
no.
Okay, I'm not really. I have cats. I don't know, why would a condo company be afraid? Is he peeing a lot on the floor? Is it maybe the feces going into the vent that's happened before? It's caused damage. Is that happening? Is that what they're upset about? No, it's just the fact that I have a large cat. And I went, okay, well, can you send me a picture of the cat? And then we can. Because I really don't know how to respond to a law firm at a Bay Street, and I'm going to say this cat is not a significant issue. I was genuinely befuddled at this point. I really didn't know what to do, because I was shocked that a firm would send or even a corporation would be that upset about a cat. But I could tell there was something I was not getting. I wasn't getting the full story. She sends me the photo. It is not a cat. It's a cougar. She owns a full cougar inside this property.
Was that some sort of a marketing ploy where
she's a dancer?
Two cougars and a cat or something like that?
Dance with the cougar, so it was a part of her act.
Oh,
and again, nothing to we're not being disparaging, or I'm not being disparaging or criticizing what she does for a living. No, that's not the problem. She spent thousands of dollars on the sort of enclosure inside in the condo for the cougar. So it had thousands of dollars worth of mesh and protective coverings. The floor was matted down. She had gone all out to take care of this animal. She was spending thousands of dollars on protecting it, taking care of it, veterinary. She had a full cook that would come and feed the animal. And I went, okay, well, she has a license for it, right? It's perfectly licensed. There was a problem with you having a wild cat in that type of environment in a condo company. So I know there were some issues with SPCA and some other things like that, but she was ultimately able to keep the animal, right? That's not my concern.
So within the condo corp rules, it didn't.
That's the thing, and that's the problem, because the condo company is now attempting to sue my client because of the tenant. But that being said, you can't currently evict the tenant for the animal. She's technically not breaking any rules. So you've got a civil issue here. Now the landlords are sort of standing in between, not knowing what to do. Does he say, do I try to force this woman out? I'm going to be that type of landlord and remove her because of what she does for a job? He's not upset by it. He has higher market rent. The property's perfectly fine. Great tenant, but someone's leaning on him at the same time. So now he's in between both these parties, the condo company is extremely upset and wants her out of the property, which ultimately they can do, right? If they force him out, she's gone. It doesn't necessarily matter, right? So they're giving him an ultimatum. They're not really giving him a choice. So now he has to go forward and attempt to evict her. So then you have a lot of issues. He starts getting calls from citizen action groups from Toronto, a lot of rental groups like Acorn and that type of thing, and they were advocating for the tenant. And I explained to her, and I said, a lot of things were heated, and she was obviously upset for every reason why she's being essentially forced out of her home, and she hadn't done anything wrong legally or whatever you may believe. It was just another civil party that was upset by it.
But I just wanted to say something there. Like, okay, maybe she didn't do anything wrong legally on paper, but I'm sorry, like, to have a cougar in your condo,
I think it's fairly odd. I think it's fairly odd. Like, it's a tiny apartment. I'm saying this because legally speaking, that's the only thing I can say. But I personally think it's a little bit odd to have. I would think it was against some. I don't even like seeing animals in cages at the zoo.
Yeah,
that's my primary issue with it. It's just on a humanitarian.
That's the thing too. It seems just seems so cruel. Shifty. Yeah,
it seems cruel to have an animal like that. And said that I wouldn't even keep a husky in my condo. Wow, and let alone such a large territorial animal. And I think it's a wild animal. Imagine it can hurt someone. It could eat a child. It's not a joke. Yeah. It could legitimately eat someone. So and having pushback in regards, it's like you're like in the Twilight Zone, right? Because what ended up happening is I was attempting to seek her to be evicted, and we got to a hearing. At the time of the hearing, the paralegal on the other side had produced a documentation that they had registered. I can't believe they got away with it. They registered the cougar as an emotional support animal. And now here's the precedent for that, because there's actually a gentleman in Hamilton that sued Lime Ridge Mall and Cadillac Fairview because he had an emotional support boa constrictor. And it worked. He is able to take his boa constrictor through Jackson Square and through Lime Ridge Mall. He sued both of them and won. This woman got the documentation. It is, in fact, an emotional support animal. And I said to the landlord, you're out of luck. You should probably give this over to the condo board. The condo board essentially at that point backed off because there was now a legitimate defense, and this was going to be a costly legal battle. And I think actually he made the decision of actually selling the unit. So eventually she did leave, but it's bizarre at the very least, but it's a legitimate case to be made. And that's where you see small minor things that sort of affect each other inside the legal chess game of things. And ultimately you had someone claim that was an emotional support animal. So,
ladies and gentlemen, this is why I'm a huge advocate of dealing with paralegal services, even if it's non-payment of rent, even if it's something simple as whatever the case may be. We always lean on, like Andrew. It's like, at the end of the day, a lot of people might think it's simple to give in an N for non-payment of rent, and that's easy. I want to get these people out because they're not going to pay rent. You know how many stories we've heard of somebody putting in the wrong date, or something not being correct, or the name spelt wrong.
And day, month, year instead of month, day, year instead of day, month, year.
Oh my god! Like, imagine having to wait that whole 9-month period or whatever, and you're finally at this you'll see that golden arches at the end of the tunnel, that all this stress is going to be alleviated, and then you're back to the front of the line. Now you have to wait the entire time again. It's just an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, and
I would hope that with this whole timeline thing, I would hope that there's some sort of reform. I think to myself some days that the pendulum has already swung so far. It's just a matter of time until it has to come to swing back, because it can only get so crazy. Are you familiar with other provinces and their landlord tenant kind of systems? Yeah. Ontario, as from what I've heard, is probably one of the most pro tenant and the most disorganized mess of just brutality. What do you know about the other provinces?
So Ontario is the most stringent. So it has the most rules for
Mhm.
like the most tenants, right? And we also have massive difference in income level, massive difference in rental level, vacancy issues, non-vacancy issue, inflation, non-inflation. We have a whole host of other things. Um, the most interesting thing is, like, for example, if you're on crown, if you're on band land, if you're on a reserve, there's almost no tenancy laws there. It's the chief that makes essentially the rules, and depending on where it is, it could be very different. I've never seen it, but I've heard that an eviction there is essentially just the ban removing the person from the property, and that could look multiple different ways, right? It's not like a sheriff or a police officer or a bailiff that shows up at the property. It's
We should just
and
vote in a chief of Crown Point or Strathcona.
yeah, but the laws there were built for a reason, right? So this is let's talk about several years ago, let's say in the 30s and 20s. You could essentially evict someone from a property like that, no reason, and you had multiple people being cleared out. An investor would come in, or a large company or factory would want to be placed in. You'd be kicked out of your house in 4 days, 3 days, 2 days. Someone just come into your property and just remove you, and the police wouldn't do anything. So that's why there's a lot of tenancy laws in Ontario, and they're there for a good reason. But then you go into other places, let's say St. John's, New Brunswick, 15 days. You don't pay rent, 15 days. That's it. Sheriff comes to your property. That's it.
Yeah.
And and then again that changes. Vancouver's a lot different. Alberta's a lot different. It's just the nature of the community sort of changes the attitude on law. Where that spectrum is of what is correct and what isn't, and what should be and shouldn't be, you're gonna have a lot. Sorry, my cat is just screaming right now. Whatever.
It's a cougar.
Yeah, right. Whatever the sense of reasonableness for those types of laws is going to change drastically who you're talking to.
And I know that right now there's a lot of, like, especially, we're in crazy times right now. There's a lot of activist groups that are forming on either side of the spectrum. And unfortunately, what I think that's happened, especially during COVID, like more so I see it's very highlighted now because of COVID, is that like, I don't know, different opinions out there, but the government's put a wedge right in between the rental housing providers and the renters. Whereas, you don't have the means to continue these folks to work. So, like, these people have to stay home. So you're paying them CERB, but now these people don't want to pay rent. So landlords are like, what the hell's going on here? So the bank's like, well, just defer your mortgage. But the tenants think that that's okay because now they don't have to pay their mortgage, but the landlord they still have to pay their mortgage. It's just like this terrible whirlwind of a cluster F.
Yeah,
for a better term.
You've got a powder keg. So
Totally, and now all it's done is it's turned people against each other. Whereas I think that maybe, like, there's some really great tenants out there, and quite frankly, there's some terrible rental housing providers out there.
Yes.
Nobody's disputing that. I think what needs to happen is there's got to come to some sort of fairness. And no doubt for the tenants too. The tenants need to get some sort of resolution. I mean, they shouldn't have to wait 9 months either.
The one thing I've always told everyone, regardless of whatever you stand on the subject, if you're pro-tenant, non-pro-tenant, if you want more rules protecting tenants, you want less rules and making it easier for landlords to do evictions or whatever it may be, all unanimously say that the current system is not good. And that everyone can say that. The time that it takes to get from an application directly in front of an adjudicator is far too long. It's far too long. So I have a client right now, and actually a colleague of mine had this is a pregnant mother, 3 children, 6, and the landlord didn't serve her with any papers to ask her to leave the property. Had just simply walked into the property at one point when she was out at work and then cut the front door and front wall out. So the house is just like open to the street, and then put plyboard up. So she comes home, picks up her kids from daycare, walks up to the house, and just the front area is just completely gone. So imagine like you live on the Hamilton Mountain. This is where the property is. The door is gone, and then the front window just gone, and the brick is gone too. Now he's just done that because he wants her to leave, and it's during COVID, so he didn't even bother sending her an application because he sort of knew that she wasn't going to leave, so he just took down the front wall. So and then this is the problem. What do you do as a practitioner? What do you do? Do you call the landlord? Do you call the rental enforcement? Who do you call? I initially, rental enforcement was called. They didn't really do much. Called the police. Police initially said this is a landlord-tenant matter. Put an application through. Of course, the application went through, but that would take what? A month? 2, 3? For someone that's just essentially been removed from a property like that. So I had to call the police again. Finally, a constable made that decision to call the landlord and say, hey, if you do not fix this in the next couple of hours, there's going to be a problem. Right? And he immediately ran back to the property and took care of it. And then on the flip side...
So if a constable can make those kind of rulings, why can't a constable make other rulings?
It's shaky. It's very shaky. The precedent...
Who's shaky?
So, it's not really their ability to do such things, right? So there's a lot of jurisdiction on who can do what and how they can do whatever, right? So a constable can do certain things, but it can't, a constable can't really jump into a full landlord and tenant matter because that's what the board is there for. He's also not an adjudicator. He's not a board member. He's just a constable. He's there to keep the peace, right? But at this point in time, the constable thought it was necessary for the immediate safety of the individual to take, to call the landlord and actually deal with the matter. I have never heard of a constable doing that before, right? That was a sort of one-off. And then additionally, this was the most heartbreaking and difficult ones that I dealt with. It was a landlord rented a property and it was in the news. The gentleman had $250,000 worth of cocaine and heroin and 5 machine guns in the property. That was in March. I got the eviction order. Sorry, I didn't get the eviction order. It has to go to the Superior Court of Justice. So I'm halfway through the process, and we are in the end of June, 23rd, and that was in March. Imagine living in the same property of someone is in fact a drug dealer and very well connected with gangs. Imagine how petrifying that is, and there's nothing to be done, right? And imagine now, he's not there alone. He's got other tenants. Tenants have put applications against the landlord saying that why haven't you gotten this person out? Now he's pleading. He's afraid because what does he do now? Because now he has 2 applications against him, and then he's also has an application against the other gentleman. And now the tenants are petrified. And as much as you can have a conversation, and it's just at a roadblock. And this is what's the worst thing, in my opinion. The tenant applications will be heard before the landlord's application. So the tenant applications happened already. So the landlord was penalized for not doing anything while he was trying to do something.
That is wild. That is the stupidest thing.
Explain to me how that's equitable and fair. Explain to me on whichever side you want to stand on, whatever side. I really don't get it. I genuinely don't. How that can happen to someone.
So landlord and rental housing or a tenant are both putting their applications in at the same time for a mutual benefit to get this person out. But the tenants have to go the route of complaining that the landlord hasn't done anything because the landlord has to follow the right channels.
Yes.
The tenant, their stuff gets heard first because the landlord, obviously, they get put on the back burner. And because he actually tried to do something, he got penalized just because they got heard first.
Yeah. And I want to specify because I know there's going to be some people out there that are going to listen to this and say, you can do this, and this. So I'm just going to explain it. There is an emergency motion form that you can get from the Landlord and Tenant Board to apply to get an emergency motion hearing or merits hearing, and then it goes to the division of the court to get the eviction order, right? Because the current Landlord and Tenant Board can't do that right now because it's closed. So that page is a 1-page document. They will tell you it takes 2 weeks to get processed. That is not true. It took me a month and a half to get a response that they even got the document. Then it took an additional week to get an actual answer. And an answer back can be 2 things. It could be, this is going to be scheduled in the next 3 weeks, or we don't have enough adjudicators. It's like a sort of, I've heard it from first responders, but it's a code 0. When you just call 911, there's nowhere to come. It's essentially, that's what happens. There's not enough adjudicators. They can't hear it. So that's it. So this actually went through, and I have 8 emergency motions currently. That one is the only one that I've heard back from. They were all filed at the exact same time. I have nothing to say to my clients because there's nothing to be done. That's it.
I mentioned to you we were about Kale on trade and the Ontario Landlord Watch.
Yes.
Yeah, they're an activist group that is obviously fighting for the rights of landlords and rental housing providers all throughout. So, one thing that they've pitched, and they've written a lot of letters and stuff like that to the local governments and things like that. So, one thing that they're pitching is, a lot of the nuanced stuff. If that has to take some time, they get it. But what we should do is create a better system for the N4.
Yeah.
You don't need someone who's appointed in the government or in the LTB system to tell me that this person hasn't paid rent in 6 months. I'm sorry, it does not take a rocket scientist to do that. You don't have to have special training, whatever. You don't have to be appointed, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, people should be trained properly, of course. But if you're not paying your rent, there's no reason. And if you think about the backlog that we have in the Landlord Tenant Board, if you think about that, 98% of them are probably for non-payment of rent.
Yeah, roughly about that. I would say I don't know the exact figure, but it's a
I'm just shooting off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But if you think that the largest number of them are the ones that are completely clogging up this whole system, if you can erase that, wouldn't that be huge savings for the government?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that make this process simpler? Wouldn't it make landlords, tenants happier? It would make this process so much easier.
Personally, I would like to see it go to written submission. I've heard of that before, where it's just you submit the documentation and that's it. Right? It doesn't need to go to a hearing. But if and then it gets sent over to both parties, and then both parties send it over to the adjudicator, and the adjudicator takes a look at the documentation, and then renders a verdict.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what it should be, right? But having a hearing, and I understand because there's a lot of issues, and there's a reason why hearings were instigated in the first place. But you're just seeing, if PEI is at 1,000 cases in the backlog, I would say we're
10,000, if not
something more than that.
Yeah.
If you were and I always tell these to everyone, if you're buying or selling a property and that tenant does not leave, there is nothing you can do. If your tenant stops paying rent right now, there is nothing you can do. Even when COVID is over, there will be, again, nothing you can do. If your tenant just says, I'm not paying rent anymore, I would give you a year or 2 years if they decide to squat on the property.
So it's a heartbreaking concept. So what do you suggest that people do?
That's the $1 million question. I think probably stay on the good side of your tenant. Yeah. That's as of right now, that's the only thing you really can do, because even someone like me, and I'm highly specialized. I only work in landlord and tenant law, if anything. And if my hands are tied, yours are you don't even have a chance. So, there's not much to be done. So I have I have files from a year ago that aren't going to be seen in a very long time. Right. Yeah. So, and that's going to be the norm for the foreseeable future. And I don't say foreseeable future as in the sense of COVID. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the next 6 to 7 months. I'm talking about the next 2 years. I'm saying the next 2 to 3 years.
I think that anybody who's listening, and, to focus on the plan, not the problem. I think that the only thing that we can do right now, and what we're advocating, is get in touch with these support groups. Get in touch with folks like Andrew or Kale from the Ontario Landlord Watch. Start to collaborate with these folks that are looking to make a difference, and let's all pool our resources. At the end of the day, I think that what's happened is, through time and time again, when tenants get evicted, I think that the natural progression is just say, oh, thank Christ, these guys are gone. And nobody follows through. Nobody goes through the actions of actually doing it. Well, I'm not saying nobody, but I'm saying a large portion of people just say, okay, you know what? It's just over and done. I'm just going to move on with my life right now. And the problem is that we end up just wiping it under the rug, whereas I think that we need to start to make a bit of a stink about this.
Yeah, and I really will. I really would advocate for something like that, because the current system is just not working.
For sure,
it's just not working. It's not there, and just while you're talking to me, I just took a look at. I have my emails open here. I just received notice for a hearing on Friday. It's Tuesday. The deadline to submit documents was an hour ago. I don't have an answer. So I'm going to have to call my tel and explain to them in the next couple of hours that I just missed the deadline to submit documentation. I just received that email from the board a couple minutes ago.
And when did you submit?
I was supposed to submit an hour ago. The documentation for that was a T2 application. So I have no idea what's going to happen with that, and I'll have to deal with it tomorrow or this. Well, we're way past the board's time. I'm just taking a look at the clock here. It's 6:50. So yeah.
So you had submitted this application already through their system.
Yeah.
And their system's so clogged up that it didn't actually process it, and now it says that you've missed the boat? Pretty
much. Or at least this still looks like it was a clerk that just sent it out to me. So I'm just reading it here. The hearing is, yeah. So, yeah, the deadline has passed for submitting evidence. I doubt if I just got this, I know for sure the other side hasn't seen this. So, so that's the problem. The system doesn't work.
And that's what I keep thinking though too. Is like I'm trying to keep my optimist hat on, but with this being such a broken system, it has to change. It really does. Have you ever dealt with some of these
conversation and that happens at the same time? Yeah. It's incredibly. I am quite upset right now, actually. But it highlights the problem. It's so frustrating, and a lot of adjudicators get that. A lot of members understand, and they hear it over and over again. Your Honor, Madam Member, I'm quite frustrated with this process. They're not used to it. They don't understand it. A lot of people have a lot of animosity towards the system whatsoever as it currently runs, and that is so true. Because I don't see how this can continue. I really don't, Alex. I really don't see how it can continue, because you're going to have a lot of people, A, not getting fair recourse if something bad happens to them, and B, a lot of people that own property aren't going to have any recourse if something happens to them. So who are you serving? Because you don't serve anyone right now. Yeah.
That's a good point. Very good point. So have you, out of curiosity, you ever dealt directly with any of these activist groups for the tenant side of things, like ACOR and those kind of folks?
Oh yeah, that's a hot button topic. You're gonna put a group somewhere, right? I'll be labeled as something, because the only thing I
quickly change your name to someone else.
The only thing I dislike about this entire situation is how people can, take a statement, or they can take a side, and then they can, they dislike one particular statement that you said, and then all of a sudden you're a part of the group, and they fit the argument to whatever way they wish, and you're now pro-tenant, pro-landlord. You're one thing or the other. That's not my job. My job isn't to advocate for anybody. My job is to advocate whoever pays me. That's my job, right? Yeah. I'm your legal practitioner. I'm your representative. When I'll fight just as much for a landlord the same way as I fight for a tenant. Now the thing is, I don't historically represent tenants that often. That is the case. I do primarily work with landlords, but that doesn't say I don't represent tenants. I've done all of my pro bono work has always been for tenants, right? And that's not to say that's a significant thing to do. A lot of paralegals and lawyers do that type of thing. But I have, just to get to your question, I have dealt with a few of them. But in the nature of it, they are political parties, right? And that's the fear of I know a lot of practitioners that don't want to talk about these types of things, because I know horror stories of quite a few of individuals that said one statement and then all of a sudden it's something else. So a lot of people sort of back away and shy away from dealing with the problem, and aren't willing to come forward when they see actual injustice or actual problems. Just because of you could get immediately canceled, or you could have a reprimand, or you can have a lot of things happen against you. That's not feasible, right? You have a lot of tenants dealing with a lot of problems from a lot of bad landlords, right? And then vice versa, right? Yeah. I personally, the only thing I advocate for, really, honestly, is just that
justice
and fair and equitable recourse for everyone. That's it. As long as the process is fair, that's it.
And
Right?
I would stand by that comment as well. I think that if a landlord is being a shyster, then there should be repercussions.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
No doubt. But I do think that there has to, like, it's funny. Kaylee and I were talking about it the other day, and she brought up a point that she had heard that was interesting, where it's as soon as you buy a property, rent out a property, you have literally given up all your rights to that property.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a crazy concept. Like, here I am, like, I feel like I'm lending the property out to somebody who I'm hoping is going to take very good care of it and treat it with the respect it deserves. And as such, I am going to keep serving that person, because at the end of the day, the way I see our business is the tenant's my customer. And I would like to keep my customer happy, and I'm happy to do that. And so if something should break or something goes awry, then I'm there to make sure that I'm, providing a service.
Yeah.
And we try our best to have great relationships with our tenants. We have some awesome tenants. So I don't know where it all went wrong. I don't get it, but I don't understand how there's people out there that are advocating for, like, partial ownership of, like, a landlord's property because they've lived in it for so long. I mean, like, these things blow my mind. Like,
Yeah, it's a significant problem on both sides of the issue. I don't know when it happened. Some people, like, a lot of people would say, and a lot more influential people will say, the nature between a landlord and a tenant is, like, that relationship is always adversarial. It doesn't need to be, but a lot of people have the idea in their head that it is. And
we have a tenants, and Kelly just helped them buy a house.
Yeah,
because
it doesn't need to be.
They were great tenants,
Yeah.
and they wanted to buy a house at some point, and we're like, hell yeah, why wouldn't you want to buy a house? We wanted to buy houses once upon a time when we were renters. Why wouldn't you? And they're like, in fact, can you help us? And we're like, yeah, absolutely, we'd love to help you. It's great, and they're fantastic people.
Yeah, you have to find a reasonable center, because and I'll give you, sort of prepare for this. I have two pretty good examples of what can happen. So let's look at the alternative. Let's say a very high pro landlord based landlord and tenant board. Let's say it's completely advocated by landlords, and heavily weighed inside their favor. You look at something like the London Tower fire, right? Someone comes in, does a BRR strategy, buy, rent, or refinance, rent, redoes an entire apartment block, and then uses substandard contracting, uses aluminum inside the contracting. The entire place goes up like a matchstick. 64 people die, right? That causes significant changes in landlord tenant law. And then flip that, then you've got heavily pro-tenant based social systems of tenancy and tribunal, and that's in the Nordic countries, where you'll have many people now that just aren't willing to rent their properties, and they owe many. So we're talking 100, 200 properties, 300 properties, and they're just not renting because they'll hold it for equity. So what they're doing is, once the tenant leaves or whatever, they're just staying stagnant, because essentially what it is, the difficulty of even removing a tenant for any reason whatsoever, if you're being sold, if it's damaged or whatever it may be, it's incredibly hard. So you have people flipping, and now you've got a very high vacant property problem in the Nordic countries, and you see that happening. And that comes with a whole host of other issues with investments. It actually negatively influences your economy and negatively influences your tenancy, because now no one wants to rent. What happens? All the rental prices just skyrocket. But you have a large backlog of amount of places that you can rent to.
Yeah.
So it's like, you have to find a happy medium in between.
Totally. And I'm all for it. You got to find something that's going to work for both. Yeah. But, not doing anything is not the right solution.
No, it's not. No.
Anyways, my friend, we are getting to the time where we would end this. That was an hour, by the way. That just literally flew by. So once again, I'd like to say personally thank you to you. You're, once again, a wealth of knowledge. For anybody who's looking for any sort of paralegal help, please, I definitely recommend Andrew Choubeta. He gets recommended to all of our clients who are going through any sort of challenges. He's the right guy to give some advice. And you've helped us through situations where we didn't necessarily have to take it to the tenant board. We kind of found a resolution otherwise. So how can people get a hold of you?
Well, you can contact my office at I'm with Benchmark Law Office down in Hamilton, Ontario. We're at 195 James Street South. I'm drawing a blank on what my phone number is all of a sudden. My office number. Yes, 289-389-8840. You can give us a call there. Myself, Ed Woods, and Holly Robertson work out of that office. Landlord and tenant law, small claims law, construction, even some medical, a lot of things. So if you do have a problem, just give us a shout, and we'll certainly be able to help you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're all fighting the good fight, and thank you for your wealth of knowledge. And
Glad to be a help, my friend.
all right. Well, have a good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Take it easy, guys. Bye-bye.